What's up, Flooring family? Welcome to the Huddle. Welcome back. We're coming to you every Tuesday, 3 p.m. Central. With me, as always, Jose and Daniel Gonzalez from Preferred Flooring up in Grand Rapids, Michigan. Got a special guest today, Dana Canaday, which Dana is a controller at our other company, Stuart and Associates, so she does a lot with payments and such, which is our topic today. So this is the final part to a 3-part series. So you want to be a commercial flooring company or contractor. And I would come out and say the very first thing, this is on getting paid. If you haven't watched previous 2 episodes, you have got to go watch those. So go to our YouTube channel, subscribe, throw us a like, or visit one of Preferred's social platforms or our social platforms. It's all over. So watching those 2 is most important to today. So kicking that off, I'm just going to come out and kind of refer back to last week. So we were talking about the G702, G703, really intriguing topics here, but they are the getting those 2 documents right is probably the most important thing of you getting paid. All the other stuff is, the lien waivers and such, that varies on contract to contractor, contractor to contractor, whether or not they require those. But almost every single contract that you get is going to require those AIA documents, again, G702 and G703, which is the schedule of values and your application for payment. So that being said, I'm going to start it off with a question to, let's just kick it off with our special guest, Dana. Dana, you've been in construction for how long? Tell us a little bit about yourself.
Yeah, so I have worked in the construction industry for about 10 and a half years. And I started out working for a general contractor and actually worked with them for quite a long time, and before making the move to Stuart and Associates just a few months ago, actually. And also, just thank you so much for having me on today. I have listened to your podcast, and I think you guys are putting out some really great content, and I think it's going to be really helpful to the industry. So thank you for committing to getting that done, and thanks for having me on.
Well, we are very happy to have you. In your time frame at a general contractor, so your insight on these topics is going to be really valuable, because you've been on both sides of the payor and the payee on that we're addressing in this podcast, which is your specialty contractors that work for you. And you worked for a really good contractor that has a good reputation, builds quality projects, and also is a good payer. We realize that that's just not the whole industry and the whole market. So sometimes you got some challenges out there. And without getting too specific, could you tell me some of the challenges when you were a GC, what it was like on getting paid from owners, since that's where it really kind of all starts?
Yeah, great question. And I would also agree with you that, having that background of submitting the proper paperwork the first time is definitely the most important key to getting paid, whether you're a general contractor or a subcontractor, because it's the first step in getting your pay application moved in line for payment. But I think some other important tips for potentially risky or not knowing whether or not you're getting paid is knowing who you're doing business with, understanding who your customer is and what kind of situation that they might be in. Obviously, that's not always possible depending on the size of your company or the kinds of projects that you do. But I definitely think that that can help in having a better, understanding of even like how your pay application is going to move through their system. But I think some of the common reasons for non-payment is, funding, getting payment from on the GC side. It could be, from the bank, or if there's other parties involved.
So that's like when a GC is working for an owner who has a loan to build their building, and they do a pay application to the bank, basically, correct?
Yeah, that's exactly right. And sometimes it's also through the architect. So it kind of just depends on what the project is. But definitely those things go all the way down the line, as subcontractors are intimately familiar with, right?
Yeah. Yeah, I think one of the challenges for a sub is we don't get the chance to interview with the owner or really get intimate details on the owner. So sometimes, you'll have a project that goes really well. We actually have one. I won't mention the name of the project, but we have a project that went really well. And our payment has been very, very slow or held. And it's the owner. And at the end of the day, we don't have as much opportunity to investigate and know who we're dealing with. So what would you say for a sub, which is the seat you sit in now? What do you say, like, do you look at, because I kind of consider looking at the general contractor, if they're good payers, then and they have a good reputation of paying, then they're pretty good at vetting their ownership of who they do work for. Is that a good statement, or is there more to it?
I think that definitely contributes, but just what, like I was saying about having that relationship and knowing who the owners are as a subcontractor, you can do the same thing with the GCs that you're working with, and understanding how they determine even what projects they're going to bid, or and I feel getting into construction, like one of the things that I love is that it's so relational. And I loved hearing stories when I first started of people being able to do $1 million projects on a handshake, and we just don't live in the day and age where you can really do that anymore. But it's really just about like honoring your word, and knowing who you're doing business with, even if that's the GC. I think that helps in, all of the whole process.
Daniel and Jose, how do you guys go about? Do you guys, we've all gotten the contracts that say things like reference the master contract between the owner and the company supersedes this contract in certain ways and certain things. Do you guys dig into that and try to get to know who the owner is, or do you, when you get a contract that references the general contractor's contract with the owner?
I think the stuff that we've been bidding, it's a lot of hospital work, and the companies around here, we actually know who the owner is. It's not like just some random person or something like that. But I don't think we've gotten to where it says, get with that contract, and then the one that we did get it that said, refer to that contract, they did include it, and we did have to skim through that just to make sure.
Yeah.
I was
What's
going to
your-
say that depending on, the size of the, subcontracting company that you are, it may not always be feasible to dig into all of those details. You know what I'm saying? Like, if you have a lot of jobs that you have to like read through, 120 pages of contract, like I mean, that's overwhelming and intimidating, you know, and honestly, it's not even always reasonable that you can do that. You know, it kind of
Well,
depends on how your company's set up.
fortunately, fortunately for me anyway, and this is my view, is a lot of what's in that contract is open to interpretation, right? Like if that master contract specifically says the general contractor, and I try to exclude anything that doesn't pertain to flooring, and I leave that to the general contractor. Like it says general contractor, doesn't say specifically for the flooring contractor. So I try to use that. Is it going to hold any weight? I don't know, but it's not specified for me to abide by. So I try to eliminate that from my portion as well when going through and trying to figure out what terms.
I think that's where, some of this comes back to Paul's point last time when he was talking about make sure that there's a spec in there telling you exactly what you need to do and what needs to be provided.
Yeah, that outline of the scope is like imperative. If you can get it in your contract, it helps a lot. But, I think the reason we're starting here is because payment really depends at the very first level is doing business with people who pay. And sometimes when you're doing hard bid work and you don't know who the GC is going to be because it's a full hard bid and all the GCs are bidding it, all the subs are bidding it, and you end up with that job, you don't always have the opportunity to select who you're working with. But when you do, and if you're going to bid the hard bid stuff, that's a risk you got to take. But when you're bidding negotiated stuff, like I know that you guys do probably 90% negotiated at Preferred. We do a really fair amount of our work is negotiated as well. That's better, obviously, because you get to know who you're dealing with from the beginning. And you seem, and it's more relational, which we had a whole podcast on building relationships with your GCs and your client in general. But it all starts with having a good relationship and knowing the company that you're working with, and then kind of getting the flow or understanding their flow of payment and what they request. And you still won't always get it right. But a lot of those things, a lot of the real difficult projects that we have ran across are the hard bid jobs. Just about every one that I can think of, that's not all of them, but that are harder to collect on, it's the hard bid job, the open bid market projects.
And honestly, I would challenge business owners to even consider, are you even profitable and successful in those other jobs that it's worth it to continue doing a lot of work that way? Because when you have a relationship, I mean, having the benefit of doing negotiated work is a great privilege and a testament really to the kind of work that you do, that someone trusts you well enough to give you that work.
Yep.
Yeah, and I'm going to go back a couple of years too, to where we weren't necessarily in the best of situations when we were trying to, spread our wings a little bit into sales. And I'm fortunate to have relationships with some of the local contractors and asking them like, hey, if you're asking me to bid on this work, right? I know it's not negotiated. You have to get X amount of bids. What if I ask for 50% up front if I'm awarded the contract? Like, well, we don't really do that. I was like, well, I'm not really in a position to be able to afford, to float out, $50,000 here and 30 there, 100 here. We're not, and like, we're not in that position yet. And, all they would say was, we'll work with you on it if you get awarded. And then that kind of solidified that if we did get awarded, we got awarded the smaller jobs. So that way it's easier for them to say, it's not over X dollar amount, so we're not going to do 50%, or we can't. But we did try to work our jelly on that for a little while, and it did work.
Were you successful with that in some regards, you guys?
The ones that we started doing that with will still, like, every time a contract comes through, they're like, if you need a bill for anything, let me know.
Yeah, and honestly, I would also encourage that. And Paul and I have kind of talked about that recently, but I would definitely encourage, because the general contractors that you do have those really good relationships, obviously they want to keep you happy as well. And unless you're having those relationship kind of conversations so that they are understanding where you're coming from and really set everybody up for the best possible success, right? Like, we can meet these deadlines if we can have these kinds of things, then it makes everything.
It made it a lot easier for us. And I don't know if you guys can hear me right now, but it was a little glitchy for a second.
We can hear you.
Being a smaller company and starting from the labor only, and I was not shy, right? Like, everything on the table, everything on the table. Like, you guys, I want to get to a point where I can afford to float this for any project that we're awarded with you guys. However, in order for me to get to that platform, I need to be transparent, and I need to say, this is the route that we can take to get to that point. So that way we're not overextending our finances and loans and trying to, leverage funds that aren't necessarily ours. So and then with that, going that route, and then some companies from out of state contacting us and wanting us to bid, I'm like, well, I don't know you guys. So because we don't have a relationship, we do require 50% down payment of the overall bid until we have an established relationship. There's no ifs, ands, or buts. And they either said, sorry, we don't want to work with you, or they said, okay, no problem.
Hey, Dana, you're on mute.
Jose, I think you brought up a really great point, and putting it out on the table. There's this risk involved with being vulnerable with someone, right? I mean, that's really in any kind of relationship that you have in your life, but in business, to be vulnerable like that, you run the risk of them saying, like, no, we don't want to work with you, or even making it hard for you to do business because maybe they're going to join check all of your stuff or things like that. But the thing is that when you're vulnerable, it builds trust with people. And so if you're dealing with the right people, then they're going to learn that they can trust you because you've been honest with them about where you're at. And I think those are great ways to develop relationships with your GCs or owners or whoever you're working with.
Yeah, sometimes it's when that very first, at the very beginning, when you're dealing with a new contractor, back in if you're doing a smaller project with a new contractor, it's one thing, but like a big hospital or something with the new contractor, I wonder how that would go over to, ask, and this is honest question. I want, for example, we have a 1.3 or 4 or $5 million project that we just bid and we were interviewed for, and it looks like we're on the front, we're in the front of the race at the moment. What would it do to say, hey, we really need 50% of the material cost or something like that paid, within, even if you gave some different terms like net 30, not pay when paid, but net 30 type stuff.
Right.
Wonder how that would go over with those bigger contracts.
So, what led me to that is when the conversation came up about the finances and if we can afford it, or from me saying that I can't afford to do that, is they were like, well, then if you can't afford it, then why are you trying to do it? And I said, okay, so if you're saying that to me, so it's on the same hand. If you're asking me to bid on this and you can't afford to put 50% down, why do I want to come and work for you?
That's real. That's good, dude. I like that.
You're telling me that I got to gamble, but you're not willing to do it either, right? So you meet me in the middle. It's the same thing. It's the trust thing. Bigger businesses, they just have a lot more literature, paperwork. They have a bigger team, but at the end, it all gets filtered down to the same values, same understanding, same principles.
That's exactly right. Good point.
Hey, Daniel, so I got a question for you. I know you do a lot of the office work and stuff, but I think the next point is I'll make a statement and then follow that up with a question on how you maybe do a collection call at preferred when you need to call and collect. But understanding the contract terms for our audience is kind of the next step. Like, you really have to understand what those terms are for your contract. If it's pay when paid, and understanding the pay schedule from the owner to the contractor as best as you can is kind of your, your next step after you've done your, your AIA documents, your application for payments correctly. Then it's like understanding what to expect from them. And then you got to call and follow up on getting paid sometimes. So I was curious on, from your perspective and what you guys do there at Preferred, Daniel,
I think
what's that look like?
we've been lucky to not have to deal with any of that, to the point where even when we were, waiting on retainage, the construction company was very upfront with us and was like, I mean, we already got most of the payment. Then it's like, hey, the owner isn't giving us the remainder of this check. And we're like, almost every other day they were contacting us saying that they were contacting the owner. But as far as like not receiving payment, we haven't run into that on a contract basis. A lot of the payment stuff that we do have issues with is for other flooring contractors as a subcontractor, or actual homeowners. Like, that's why I'm not a big fan of dealing with the residential market.
Yeah.
But
Well, the residential is a whole
Right.
nother thing, but you always get 50% on that, don't you, up front?
Yep.
Or
Yes.
is that not? I don't
Yes.
do enough. We do, I don't know, 5 to maybe on a busy residential year, 10 residential projects, but we always get payment up front with that.
Yeah, no,
So,
yeah, I would advise that. And just for everyone listening too, I want to make sure that this gets said too. The 50% that down payment is because of material and labor. It's not just a labor only project; it's the full scope. So we're not
Yeah.
like accepting a large labor only job and just asking for money for work that we haven't completed. No, it's to cover our butts on the material and the purchase of and securing it and insuring it.
Well, and in construction, you can't actually claim revenue that you haven't earned yet. So, but you can make those negotiations for materials up front. And what a great thing is that, to be able to at least secure what you need to do your project, even if it's down the road.
Sorry, I didn't mean to
Yeah,
go
and
back into
those,
left field on that.
no, but materials, your biggest, obviously your first expense and often your biggest expense on a project. So trying to cover those costs, which we did get into in a previous episode about, having your materials land so you get your bill from your vendor close to the time when you're able to then bill your contractor.
Right.
Those are kind of keys to try to help with cash flow, but so you don't have a lot of collection calls. I
was actually going to ask you what is your guys' process, so we can get a glimpse into that.
Well,
Yeah.
I have one trick that outside of what Dana does, and she does a great job. She's really helped us. Frankly, we're not the best collectors in the business. We are continually looking on how to get better. Dana's been doing a really good job on that. One thing that I always do, if I'm told that multiple times that they have not been paid by the owner, is I would like to call the owner, or I'd like to call the architect and talk to them and make sure that, see if there's anything that I can help with. Even if they're not saying it's my scope that's causing the owner to hold it, I'm just saying that I'll offer, hey, how about I call the architect and put a little pressure on and let them know that we're looking for payment, or the owner, and maybe that'll help you. A handful of times I've gotten a check within a couple of days from that, and I didn't even have to call. Now, that's not the best feeling, because it feels like they probably had the money and they were holding it for some reason. Your mind can wander on that one, but
Yeah,
the
it does.
the fact is that, you know, I didn't have to call the architect or the owner, and payment was released, and it's and when it is something, I do call the owner, and I have, in fact, I've got one particular that I'm got on my mind right now that I'm got to call the owner and talk to him, and so offering to call the owner or architect, if they have been paid, the general contractor has been paid for your portion of work. They don't want, and they are just not paying you because they're some other reason, then they really don't want you to call the architect and owner and find out that they've been paid for your scope of work.
Sure.
Because then by law, they have to pay you within 7 days if they've been paid. At least in Kansas, it's 7 days. I'm sure that varies by area, but law in Kansas is 7 days after receipt of payment from owner, the contractor has to pay their subs and vendors. So they certainly don't want you to find that out. And those are the instances where it feels like they probably had already been paid. So anyway, that's one of the things we do. We have some other collection processes. Dana can kind of give you some high level stuff there that we want. I know one of the biggest things that we've ran across is we didn't get your application for payment. We've had that. So Dana's put in some new processes and worked with some of our other leadership on that. But Dana, you want to speak to some of that?
Yeah, sure. I think that probably the most important thing about getting paid is having good communication. And that really involves knowing who you should be talking to about that. And that can vary greatly by, company, job, whatever, because sometimes you have to talk with someone in accounting, or sometimes it's important to talk with the project manager, or sometimes they have project engineers or project accountants who know that information. And knowing who the right person to communicate with is really important part of keeping that moving along. And I do think that having a system and making a point to follow up is helpful in keeping cash coming along, and identifying errors early in the process. And that really just all starts with communication, phone calls, emails, whatever honestly is successful, depending on who you're dealing with.
So that leads us to the one of the final kind of, I wouldn't call it last resort, but pretty close, is maintaining your lien rights on projects. And so I'll tell you what the lien rights are here in Kansas is you have to file lien on the project within 90 days of the last time you performed work on the project. It doesn't have to be a significant amount. It can be punch list, but it's got to be 90 days within the last time that you were on the project working. So that's the lien right. So for the audience, like, you want to maintain those. We don't lien as much as a lot of companies. I've got a friend who owns a painting company that does a lot of the same projects as I do, and they get paid a lot better than we do. And that was really revealing to me. And the fact is they'll go file lien, like, have 45 days. They're sending a letter and saying, hey, we're going to file lien if we don't get paid.
Do you think that everybody in the audience even understands what that means?
On a lien?
Uh-huh.
I don't know. Go explain that part of it, Dana.
Yeah,
just
I
in
was
case.
just wondering, because I like I said, I'm not like intimately familiar with who your audience is, but I did wonder, if people who might be watching even knew what that meant. But so really, a lien is just a claim against property that can be used as collateral to repay a debt. And so an example of something that a lot of people could be familiar with is like a car payment. So if you have a car payment, then a bank has a lien on your vehicle, so that if anything happens to that vehicle, that the bank is going to get their portion. And so you can apply that then bigger. So whenever, as a subcontractor, you're buying materials, you're paying your employees to go and perform work on a job, then you have a claim at that real property that is, being built. And so that's the only like recourse you have as a subcontractor or a supplier to make sure that you're getting paid, is to file those liens. And definitely it depends on jurisdiction and the kind of work that you do, but it is important to know what those rights are, because you could very easily diminish your rights, or even not have any
Lose them
before
all
you even
the-
get started, without knowing, what you're getting involved in.
Yeah, you could lose them altogether. One note is federal government, you cannot lien those projects. So, playing off of what Dana just said, some jobs you can't lien, and that's the federal government. Now, obviously, they have plenty of money. If they need it, they'll print some more. So
Yeah.
it's pretty easy to know who you're dealing with in that case. I would say one more add on to your lien, or maybe just to build on that a bit. So the idea is, when a bank transfers title ownership of a building over, and they can't close out a loan, for example, on a building if there's a current lien on it. So that's why you want to lien early. If you are going to lien a project, the fact is that bank can't close out the note on a project that they have funded, if there's current mechanic liens on them. Also, say for example, the owner is not, this is a worse scenario where the owner owns the building, didn't take out a loan for the remodel. Maybe he's paying cash or has investors to do it. So if you lien his property, he's going to be there anyway. There's no trigger to make your lien worth something. It only comes into effect if he tries to sell that property. So you're still protecting yourself, but it could be years down the road before you get the money, if ever, if you're dealing with somebody really.
Right. And a lien is something that you have to renew, right? You have to renew the lien every year or something like that.
Yeah, sometimes they'll bond around it or do other things, but yeah, it's definitely something that you kind of continue at until you get what you want. And obviously saying that, you can put out some money to get money, so it has to be worth it. You have to know what you're in it for. So
No, I do know that here in Michigan, there's like windows of opportunity, right? Like you got to submit a notice to lien within certain time parameters, and the same there as well.
Well, it's a little bit different so if you're going to file a lien, it depends on the property, really. All residential, you have to notify the owner. So for example, if you're doing work for a builder, you have to notify the owner that that you have an intent to lien that property. Commercially, you don't always have to do it, but a notice of intent to lien being sent to the GC and to the owner, and if there's an architect, then that's kind of your first course. You don't just run out and file a lien. I would encourage everybody to first file a notice of intent to lien and name everybody on it, and then once you've done that, and you can do that in-house. Like, you can save the attorney's fees for that part. I mean, not legal advice, please always talk to your attorney, but I mean, in most regards, you can send that notice of intent to lien yourself. It's something that frankly, we probably need to be a lot better at, but at the end of the day, filing that first kind of puts everybody on notice that a lot of times the owner doesn't know that you have not been paid or that the sub's not been taken care of, and it's the GC and then they put pressure on the GC and make them pay you. B is they have a right to know what's going on in the background, and if they're because an owner of a big building, they don't know all the subs intimately for sure. Sometimes they may not even know who you are. Their contract is with the general contractor, and so they're depending on them to vet the subs correctly and make sure they have a good quality sub crew. But the owner does, as a course of respect, does probably need to, best practice would be to send that notice of intent. So that's kind of the way we do it. And again, this is always changing. Another thing that I can say is that we've done business with certain companies for 10, 15 years, and then they change their accounting system, or they have some turnover in their accounting department, and all of a sudden they're just it's from a payer's or a paying standpoint, it's like dealing with a total different company. So yeah, just kind of having your head on a swivel, knowing your client, all the stuff we've talked about already. And then to kick it back, do you guys ever get that excuse that they didn't get your payout? Do you guys not get that?
Yeah.
It didn't seem like it, and we get it enough that it's like,
So
we're talking about like,
since I handle all the pay apps, I'm usually I'm sending them, and then I'm like, please reply so I know you got this. And then if they don't reply, that's when I'm like making sure that they got it. It's the invoices where people act like they don't get, even though since we use QuickBooks, it'll say right on there, open this day at this time, open this day at this time.
Yeah, we didn't get it. You only opened it 27 times.
Yeah, QuickBooks is tough from a job costing standpoint, but some of those things are sure freaking handy. Knowing when they opened your pay app, or because a lot of times an opened email doesn't mean they read your pay app, and I've had that excuse like, yeah, I seen the email, but the pay app I didn't know
it wasn't attached,
so I didn't. Yeah, or it wasn't attached, or something, right? So yeah, we've talked about like that follow-up that you just spoke of, Daniel. I think is one of the things we're getting better at, is like we send out our billings, our pay apps, and then we follow up. Hey, is there any problem with this? Do you see any issues? Did you receive it okay? That kind of thing. And then there's that balance of like not wanting to totally exasperate your client with so much of it, but at the end of the day, we got to get paid for what we do.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, we spend a lot of money to get other people's jobs done.
I have a question, and this, I don't know if this even applies in a commercial, but we've done work with real estate agents before, and purchase material, done the work, and said that we were fine waiting until property was closed on for us to receive a check from the title company. Does that happen in commercial as well? I mean, we've never had it in commercials. That's why I'm asking. And then how did you guys approach that if it does?
Not to my knowledge, not that particular arrangement. Nothing comes to mind where you're waiting for them to close on the building or what have you. Although, I mean, in essence, that's kind of what retainage ends up being. It seems like is, once it's closed on, then you get that final money. But from an overall project standpoint, I could see where developers or big residential builders would love to have that kind of a situation where they can build their spec homes and you carry the receivable until they sell that spec home and then you get paid. I hope the profit's there for you,
right? Yeah,
if you're doing those types of deals.
Yeah, we haven't done any of that unless there was a contract in place already and we were just waiting for the turnover. So,
yeah.
we did have some weird scenarios too, though, like where one of my buddy actually passed away before an invoice was satisfied, and that was the contract. The contract transferred over to the homeowner, and it was a long journey, but we made it through it and got it.
Yeah, that's unique. You can get in a ton of different scenarios from a residential and all those types of deals. You know, a lot of these big builders in the residential world, I'm sure, operate some level of not, you know, you're not going to get 50% down and those kinds of things. It operates maybe a little more like a commercial job, but in commercial, the key is everything we've talked about in this podcast and the two previous is getting your pay apps in, understanding your contracts, and then, you know, maintaining your lien rights and follow up. Again, I probably say this on 90% of our podcast, but it really, a lot of it boils down to relationships, and good or bad, sometimes they can get hurt in collections. So that's one line to navigate, you know. All right. Well, hey, we're about 20 minutes from an hour, and I feel like we've pretty much covered all the pertinent information here. So we might actually finish the podcast a little early today. You guys have some
That's why I started laughing.
other inputs.
Yeah, so when our local builders exchange teams up with different lawyers in the area, and they'll put on different like webinars and stuff, and I think it's at no cost, but I'm not sure since we're members, or it might be a members only thing. But like every quarter, I think they do something on liens, and it's like I've attended a couple of them, and you learn something new every time. And since it's so localized, it's everything that you have to be following in this area and what they have seen, you know, in their cases, that if you don't do this, you're probably not going to win if it goes to court. So I mean, that's an option to look into. It's not.
Is that through your is that through the chamber?
No, it's the Builders Exchange.
Okay, so it'd be like our builders association, maybe.
I was just going to say, there's actually a lot of different kinds of organizations who put on events like that. And some of them are members only, but sometimes when they're not, you do have to pay a little bit extra to attend. But it's also interesting to note that if, you know, you can go to an event put on maybe by the AGC, which is, you know, worldwide, and they might give a certain perspective, or in my previous job, I was a member of CFMA, which is for construction financial management. And so, you know, they might present it in a way. So you might be getting different bits and pieces depending on who's offering the content. And that could be really helpful as well in knowing and understanding your lien rights or pay applications and stuff like that.
Yeah, the AGC is a really good one. Are you guys a member of the AGC up there? Have you guys ever went to any of their stuff, Daniel?
No.
They're pretty good. Even if you sit in on their general contract, they have some certain meetings that anybody can go to. At one point, there was a pretty decent subcontractor community for the specialty contractors of the AGC in Wichita. That kind of fell apart, but when it was pretty live, and I don't know, maybe I should kickstart that thing back up, but when it was around, it was nice to have the different trades, whether electricians and painters, drywallers and roofers and steel erectors, all in the same building, talking about what matters to specialty contractors, to us subs. And I wish it was a stronger portion of the AGC, the specialty contractor. They did a really good job of being on our side when it was our meeting. But for the most part, obviously, it's the Association of General Contractors. So
Fair enough.
it is mainly for general contractors. But at the end of the day, man, if you might check at that in your area and see if the specialty contractors have a good meetup. It was like a monthly meetup or something like that, if I remember right. Now I used to go to them pretty often. Then the specialty contractor that was doing that ended up going out of business, honestly. So I don't think anybody's picked that piece back up here. Do you know of anybody, Dana, that's running the specialty contractor side here?
Not that I know of, and I've never been personally very involved with the AGC, but what I can tell you from what experience that I have had is that they're very pro industry. So just like you said, like they're really, I mean, they may not have something for specialty subcontractors in your area, but even if they don't, you can rest assured that the AGC was working on behalf of the industry. They're lobbying for good help for the industry as a whole, I believe.
Yeah, so
Yeah, I think
we haven't been part of that or been into any of their events or anything, but we have been to a few events for the ABC, the Associated Builders and Contractors.
Yeah.
So
Mhm.
I mean,
do we have a chapter of the ABC here?
We do.
so
Yeah, look into that.
again, really good information. The stuff that we've been to, it's, you know, they do a presentation and then they break everyone out into some workshops where you pick and choose exactly what you want to know more about, and they have experts there, and it's actually pretty sweet. We should probably get to more of those, but I believe they only do it once a year.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm
And
looking
don't
them
forget,
up
like
now. So
don't forget, we do have access to some of that information and some of the legal documents through the FCICA as well. And that's just a matter of digging in and contacting the right people. But that's it's more, I don't want to say generic, right? But it's more generalized for our industry specific. But these other associations, you'll definitely get a different perspective on how to approach anything legally or any of the other general contractors you do work with.
yeah, it's a good point. If you are considering, and if you've watched and consumed this series, I'm assuming that you're at least thinking about starting your own, material and labor, providing the whole kind of, full service flooring company. Getting involved with the FCICA is really a good idea. The other organizations are all great. Don't get me wrong, and there's plenty of them to be a part of. But the FCICA has done a really good job with the business of the flooring business. Like they've got a lot of good high quality information. Their SIM program does really well at training your project managers or your installation managers. In fact, we're trying to assemble one in Kansas City for to have a 3 days to sim there. So all that being said, getting involved with your local, or I should say your local, but your industry specific organization and associations for flooring, FCICA is really good.
And it's
all right.
great. We're not only talking, usually we're talking about the training organizations just for, installing and stuff, but there's plenty more out there for the business knowledge and stuff too, and that you just have to pick and choose. Go to some meetings, go to some of their free events and see who you like. See what works for you.
We tout it on the podcast all the time, like get to the different conventions and different shows. And FCICA, there was one coming up in September. At the end of September, they're joining forces with CFI, and it's down in Orlando. Did I get that right? Orlando?
Yep.
Rose and Shingle Creek in Orlando will be there exhibiting, as well as they're on learning more. It's a great opportunity if you're watching this. I cannot encourage you enough to get to that, because that is like a training entity and a kind of a flooring business association that came together and is doing one show, and that should create a nice synergy. and really good high quality information. So make it to that show. And like Daniel said, I mean, get to FCICA has events about was it 2 or 3 times a year, twice, at least twice, mid year and then the end of the year. So look into that. Yeah. So any other little bits of nuggets that we can give the audience before we close it up for the day?
Yes, the next regional competition for installer of the year is September 15th and 16th in Fort Wayne, Indiana. So we got to get more people signed up for this. And you know, our trade is filled with people that say they're the best. Now let's put your money where your mouth is. Let's go show everyone.
Yeah, so all you guys out there, yes.
Is there one in
everybody
Texas?
out there that's in Indiana, he said.
This one is in Indiana, and there may be one more in Texas before surfaces.
Okay.
So just as a quick overview, if anybody doesn't know what Daniel's talking about, every year there's an installer of the year for carpet, hardwood. I think that's usually some mix of LVP and sheet vinyl, but resilient.
Yep.
And then do they do ceramic? They don't do ceramic, do they?
They've changed it. So they're only doing 2 categories this year. They're doing carpet and LVP. So those are your 2 categories. I know last year they did wood and carpet.
Yeah.
And then the previous year they did have like a carpet, resilient, and ceramic, I believe, one year.
That was in
but
2020.
then there was a lot going on.
Yeah. And I know that LVP sounds easy, but trust me, when you see the patterns and the crap that is laid out, Mr. Guy who lays big rooms of LVP and says it's so easy, this is not the same thing. I can tell you that. But put your skills to test. Fort Wayne, Indiana. When is it again, Daniel?
September 15th and 16th. That's a Friday, Saturday.
And the best way to enter that show is through CFI's website, or what's the easiest way? Do you know?
That is a good question.
Yeah, I was trying to look at that earlier.
I can tell you at least you can call CFI, Certified Flooring Installers, and they'll give you the information. But I believe there was some info possibly either on the WFCA or CFI's website.
Right, I'm sure, because it's a partnership right now, so I'm sure that you can find it on either of their websites. Or it might even be on the International Surface Event website.
Yeah, so
you know what? That's probably a good place to look.
Once you've done the regional and you win your regional, you can make it to services in Vegas, and they actually, if I remember right, they pay for your trip out there.
Yep, they pay for your plane ticket, they pay for your hotel stay, they give you a couple food vouchers that get you like 1 peanut and a water if you're lucky, because that's how Vegas is.
But you forgot to tell them you got to go through a 2-hour tour of some timeshare to get that peanut.
Yeah.
All right, yeah, make it so. If you're a good installer and you want to test yourself, get to Fort Wayne, give it a shot. I can tell you, I've been to multiple of the shows. In fact, Crystal Sims, who's Daniel and Jose's sister, has competed in that, and she did very, very well. It was a blast to be there. It's a fun, it's a really fun way to prove your skill set. So yeah, so encourage everybody to make it to the CFI FCICA show at the end of September, and also get out and get involved and try to test your skills and see how good of an installer you are. See if you can make it to Vegas. So with that, I'm going to close the podcast down. Everybody, thank you for joining me, Jose and Daniel, as always. Dana, thank you for joining us today. Really appreciate your input and some of your insights into the other side of the industry, you know, the GC side. So I hope everybody got a lot of value out of this series and understanding we're not trying to scare you from going in and doing it. We just want you to be prepared and understand that it's a lot more than just, you know, printing off an invoice off of your accounting system and shooting it to your customer when you're finished with the job.
Or in some cases,
Yeah.
handwriting an invoice or just turning in a work order that the shop gives you saying, here's the invoice. It's not all that easy.
Yeah, there's a lot more involved to get your money, and we wanted you to be prepared to choose to join, you know, the commercial flooring world and start employing people and buying materials and bidding on work. It's rewarding, but it's a tough business. So we wanted to kind of give you the info up front. And I know a lot of you guys out there probably have some opportunities coming down the pipe in the next, you know, half a decade, next 5 years. There's a lot of flooring business owners that are looking to get rid of their companies or retiring, and they're looking to find somebody to take that over. And like I said earlier, I've been approached by a couple of people who that's happening to them, and they just wanted some advice to it. So hopefully this podcast can be a resource for those individuals. I know a lot of people, I can't go to convention with these two without them being, you know, inundated with crowds of people asking questions like that, you know, wanting to know what you guys are doing. So tune into the Huddle and get a lot of their thoughts and brains. And with that, I'm going to cut it out, and I appreciate everybody, and we will see you guys next week.
All right. See ya. Thanks, Dana.
Okay. Thank you.
Good day.
All right.
Thank you, everyone.
All right. See you.